Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leader's Voice series, where in each episode we sit down with pioneers in business, innovation, and leadership. We dive into their journeys, how they got to where they are, the challenges they faced, and the lessons they learned, their pivotal moments that shaped their path. Most importantly, we explore the wisdom they have to offer, insights which can guide us as we shape our own journeys. Whether you're a student, a young professional, or simply someone eager to grow, the Leader's Voice series is your space to learn, lead, and level up. I'm your host, Shloka Padola, and I couldn't be more excited to launch this very first episode of our series today with someone who is truly inspiring, a woman whose journey speaks to courage, transformation, and the power of purpose. Today, we're joined by the founder and CEO of Redefined, a platform committed to empowering international students and immigrants. She's also a business analyst at Deloitte and has been recognized globally, having received the Iconic Woman Award and being named one of the top 200 global leaders. She is none other than Ritika Saraswat. Let's give it up for Ritika. Now, before we go straight into asking questions, how are you feeling today? To be
Yeah,
with
no,
me
I'm
here.
excited. As I said, the weather isn't supporting my excitement right now, but you know what?
Mhm.
We compensate for that by having a positive mindset and going through the day.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, now that we're here, let's start all the way from the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got into this field?
Yeah, absolutely. So, by this field, you mean like consulting or you mean
Yeah.
entrepreneurship? Which one?
Entrepreneurship, consulting, what led you to starting your own business from the
Got it.
beginning?
So I think my journey goes back to about 7 years ago when I first came to Canada.
Mhm.
I'm originally from India in Pune, and when I moved here, I came in with these big ideas and goals of wanting to become someone who I did not think I could be back home. Because we all watch films and we all see the American dream that's kind of sold to us, back home. And I thought, you know what, when I arrive there, things are going to be exactly the same, and suddenly transformations are going to happen, and I'm going to have my Cinderella moment, and things are going to change automatically. But once you come here, you realize how a lot of that is not really true. It can be true, but I think it comes down to a lot of prerequisites that need to be met and a lot of efforts, not just hard work, quote unquote, which is what I thought I would need to do to get where I want to be. But I think coming to Canada or overall North America made me realize how you need to be more than just a smart person who's willing to work hard. You
Mm.
need to be someone who has a lot of social capital in this country to be able to access opportunities. And so, me being someone who at that point had no one who I knew here, I was studying at UBC in Vancouver. I was doing a kinesiology degree, so completely sports science, nothing at all related to business or consulting or entrepreneurship. I was also working multiple part-time jobs at that time, and I remember at the pizza place I was working at, I had other immigrants working alongside me who had started at those places 2 years ago themselves, and were individuals who brought 5, 10, 15 years of work experience from back home. But even 2 years later, they found themselves working full time in that exact same pizza shop. So here I was, someone who had just graduated high school, who came to a foreign country with the hope of becoming a CEO one day. And it made me look around and wonder, wait a second, would I ever become that person? Because I see so many more accomplished people around me, but here they are at that exact same spot where they started, thinking they would go past it. So I think during that time I started feeling really stuck, and I felt, you know what, maybe this is it, right? This was my American dream. I guess I had reached the height of it and it won't go further anymore. But I think for me, a lot of things changed when I got access to the right people, who in turn gave me access to the right opportunities, the right resources, and helped me in many ways realize my value and my worth. And when I experienced that, it really led to a transformation in my life in terms of the kind of opportunities I got access to. I had ended up giving up my part-time job. I'd got a job at top four consulting firms. I started doing internships, public speaking, so on and so forth all along. And it made me just one day sit back and think, wait a second, I was the same person 4 months ago. What really changed? So I think analyzing that, I realized how access to a great network of individuals is life changing. And seeing so many more other immigrants around me who were not able to do that or make that transition from point A to B made me realize it was probably because of that gap in social capital. And that's when the idea came up to really start redefine, to really help every international student and immigrant to be able to redefine themselves and move past some of those initial narratives that come towards us based on just how we look, our accent, and which country we're from, right? And even based on our status in this country, our immigration status. And yeah, that was our focus, and we wanted to help them really bridge some of that gap between potential to opportunity in those exact three areas where I found support, which was access to community, access to upskilling, and access to mentorship. So that's current our premise. We've been around for 2 years now. We started off as a non-for-profit, which is transitioning now to more of a social enterprise with our own membership models, etc., in place, and built a community of about 50,000 immigrants, and looking to launch our own platform in the summers as well. So it has come a long way from where we started. But again, I always remind myself about where we started with me having zero business knowledge and background. But that's where I think consulting also helped, honestly, because even though I did not have academic knowledge in business, I think I learned a lot of it through internships that I did at that point, and even through the full-time job that I'm doing today, where I'm learning things on the ground and honestly finding it literally like an MBA degree someone could do. I think I've been able to do that just through work experience. So yeah, I hope that gives a little bit of an insight.
Yeah, it does. And that is a beautiful transition that you've made. So let's dive a little bit more into it. So you mentioned that your background was first in kinesiology, which is in fact a field that is very different from consulting and finance. So
Mm.
how did this transition smoothly occur? And were there any transferable skills that helped you make that shift that you learned from kinesiology that you applied to consulting and finance?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I think it's
Mhm.
honestly a question I get asked very often. And I think I forget mentioning that about that transition. And I think the reason people wonder about it also, and I want to preface that, is because for the longest time we've been thinking about things very traditionally. We think, okay, if someone is studying science, they're meant to go into physiotherapy. If
Mhm.
someone's studying business, they're meant to either start their own business, work in consulting, or do something or the other in a corporate workspace. But I think today we live in a world where hiring or even access to opportunities is being dictated more by potential, which
Mhm.
is more about who are you capable of becoming and less about who are you at this moment, right? And whenever you start focusing on potential based hiring or potential based access to opportunities, what that really means is what people are really focusing on is what are those tangible skills, values, characteristics that you have that position you as someone capable to become that X person or that Y person, right? Needed for that particular field. So, and I think today that's what's most essential. That if you're looking to get any opportunity in any sort of career, or whether you want to become an entrepreneur, whether you want to do a corporate job, whether you want to become an influencer, at the end of the day, irrespective of your educational background, I think what really matters is, do you have those relevant, non-negotiable skills that set you up for success no matter what career you get into. And I think for myself, those were the skills I really honed in on during my time in university, where while I was obviously studying and making sure I meet my academic grades and standards, I was spending most of my time honestly just getting on the ground real world experience. I was working with a lot of like startups at that point, a lot of non-for-profits at that point, volunteering with a lot of clubs on campus, just to make sure I could learn as much as possible about different industries and streams and areas. And I think that really kind of helped me understand and get a sense of what do I really like doing. And that's when I realized, almost after a year of doing all of this, I realized, wait a second, I really enjoy whatever this means as consulting, where I have conversations with people, I provide advice to people, we problem solve together, this and that. And then by talking to more and more people, I realized that is called consulting, and I was like, oh, super cool, right? So I started talking to more consultants, and as I started talking to them, I was like, wow, this is insane, there's so much more within this. So I think it was just building on ground experiences helped me not just identify my passion and my why behind consulting and why am I truly passionate about it, but also helped me get really clear on what would take me from point A, which is where I was at that moment, to point B, which was being that consultant, right? And it allowed me to also start reflecting on my current experiences at that point. So I had a lot of experience, let's say, even working at different gyms or facilities where I was working with old populations, I was working with young populations, whether it's with helping them get into gymnastics or helping train old people with cycling, etc. And I realized there were so many tangible components to it. And just talking to people, and I think taking out time to reflect on my experiences allowed me to showcase transferability, not only to others but first to myself. Where when I looked at kinesiology and consulting, I was like, wait, they're so similar, because in a gym I'm spending time with a client, I understand what their problems are, I come up with a solution and a strategy for how they can go about with it, right? And then I reassess the strategies and recommendations over a period of time and make assessments as and when needed. And that's exactly what consulting is, where now maybe the type of client you meet and where you meet that client is going to be completely different, but rest the entire process of it is exactly the same. And when I understood that, I was so easily able to explain it to others. And when I did that, people were like, wait a second, I never thought of it as that. And even consultants were surprised. They were like, oh, yes, that is consulting. I was like, yes, I know it is. So I think what I realized through that entire process is, at the end of the day, if you are someone who can clearly see how that point A connects to point B, you can convince anyone else to see it, because people may not naturally see some of those connections. It's up to you to really create those opportunities for yourself by getting immense clarity on what is it that you really want to do, why is it that you want to do it, and how does what you have today lead you to where you really want to be.
Wow. Honestly, that's incredible. I think a lot of students really underestimate how flexible their skill sets really are. Now, something else I really admire is the way you've built such a powerful personal brand. It's truly recognizable and inspiring. So I know we touched on this in the beginning, but how can you explain more in detail how has building a strong personal brand helped you stand out in both business and leadership?
Absolutely. And I think another great question. I think if anyone, let's say as a student, would come to me today and say, Ritika, what's one skill that you think, if I'm someone who's smart, if I'm someone who has done my educational background, I'm meeting all the basic criteria of, basic prerequisites needed for success, but I'm still not being able to accomplish that success. So what's, Ritika, that one thing I could do to make that happen? I would say personal branding and creating visibility for yourself would be that one main thing. And a lot of the reason why I see that comes through my own experience, right? Just how you mentioned. I realized that a lot of us come through different backgrounds, whether it's educational backgrounds, whether it's economic backgrounds, whether it is cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, immigration status backgrounds, so on and so forth. And as a result of all of those contextual pieces we bring with us, it's so likely for people to assess us or judge us based on those certain stereotypes and narratives that are associated with that particular representation that we carry with ourselves, which in turn can end up dictating a lot of access to opportunities for us, right? Personal branding, in my opinion, is that tool that can really help you start taking control of that narrative and truly take ownership over your career. And how it helps you do that is because essentially, even platforms like LinkedIn are really places where you can dictate how someone perceives you by being strategic of what you put out there for them to create that perception, if that makes sense. I'll repeat that once more because I know it's a bit confusing. Is like personal branding is you influencing how someone else sees you by you being strategic of what you put out there, which in turn influences the perception they create about you, about your capabilities, and about your potential, right? So that it doesn't even give them a chance to rely on those stereotypes or those preconceived notions, but instead see you for who you want them to see you for, right? And that's why I think it's so transformative, because let's say even in my multiple journeys, when I was transitioning from kinesiology to consulting, it helped me there, because now through my LinkedIn I was showing people, hey, don't even think about the fact that I come from a science background. All the content I was talking about was constantly sharing about the experiences I was having on the ground. I was constantly sharing about what I learned on a day-to-day basis. So the only thing people thought of me when they saw my LinkedIn was, she's someone who's getting real world experience and she knows her shit, right? That was the only thing that they took away. No one even thought for a minute, oh, she comes from a kinesiology background, even though it was mentioned on my LinkedIn, right? Because of the excess content that focused on the other story or the other side of things. Similarly, when I even joined Deloitte first, let's say, and even when I got in the firm, when I joined, I asked a lot of people, hey, like I don't come from an MBA background. A lot of the people who applied for these jobs were fellow MBA students. what did you see in me that you made me get the opportunity compared to another person who has not only much more experience than me, but comes from a relevant educational and experiential background than me? And they said it was because, Ritika, of your personal brand as well. The fact that you were able to take control, create ownership, and create opportunities instead of waiting for them to come by made us feel like this is the type of person we want to surround ourselves with and have as a part of our team, right? So none of that would have happened if all I did was submitted a resume to those folks, because now their entire perception of me is limited to whatever I've just written on that piece of paper, right? Which obviously might make them initially think, oh yeah, she's not a good fit because she doesn't have any consulting experience. But now when they look at your LinkedIn, they don't just see you based on, okay, what experiences does this person have, but they see you, the real you, for your potential, for your values, for your characteristics, and they see alignment there, and they see how that's something that's transferable. That, okay, if I'm to pick her up today and put her in consulting, or if I put her in a different industry, I know she'll figure it out because of these XYZ values and skill sets that she has. And that is what I think personal branding really enables people to do. So honestly, if anyone listening to this podcast is someone who feels stuck sometimes, who feels like people have a tendency to assume what you want to do, even though it's not aligned with what you really feel you want to be seen as and known for, I think it's time you start taking that control by, first of all, defining who do you want to be known for. That's a very important question for you to ask. And sometimes, that question will always even haunt me in a way. Like, I'll keep thinking about it constantly. Like, because, even in conversations, when you show up to networking events, whether it's your online portfolio, even in class, when you're answering a question with the student and the teachers, how do teachers perceive you, right? They have great connections and networks. Do they see you for the person you want to be seen as? Like, if they know you're someone who wants to start a media company, let's say in the next 2 years, maybe they have alumni who they know of who have media companies today. So if they know that brand about you today, they would be in a position to actually help you make those connections that are going to help you propel further in your career. But if you don't end up creating that brand even in your classroom, you are losing out on those opportunities and connections that could in fact are readily available around you. So I think that's where it becomes really transformative. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely answered our question. So, key takeaway is show, not just tell.
Yes,
To show the people.
absolutely. Yes.
Yes, that is a wonderful response that we got. So, you've also shared about your experience as an international student, which so many of us are able to relate to. So, were there any specific challenges you faced as an international student breaking into business and leadership roles? And if so, how did you manage to overcome them?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges I'm sure a lot of us have heard about is the Canadian experience piece. And I think even through our own work that we do in the space, and also to give like contextual background in terms of how the landscape is and how it impacts immigrant youth differently compared to Canadian youth, is we know even right now our unemployment rate is incredibly high in Canada, right? It is about 6% for Canadian youth, but it becomes almost double for immigrant youth. And one of the main reasons that becomes double, which is 11% of unemployment, which means on average you have a lot more immigrant youth that are unemployed, is because of, beyond just skill mismatch, which is a common factor amongst both, it comes down to that lack of social capital that I was referring to. It comes down to lack of cultural understanding around what the expectations are from a workforce perspective. And it comes down to lack of Canadian experience. And those three were the exact same challenges and barriers even I experienced. Everyone experiences those barriers, though at different levels, depending on what contextual backgrounds you're coming from, beyond just your country and beyond just your immigration status, like, financial, etc., etc. Even for me, when I was entering the business space, I did not have a lot of like consultants or quote unquote partners at different companies that I knew of to even know what consulting looks like. And as a result, obviously, I think we all have the great privilege of having LinkedIn in our lives, where, a lot of that process was made more accessible. However, it did require a lot more effort, both financially and even from a time perspective. Financially, because you now have to buy the LinkedIn premium, which allows you to message more people, right? Which is, I think, about $400 a year. So relatively expensive for at least like a student, who is in high school or who's in university or college.
Mhm.
Secondly, you also have to take out a lot more time because now you don't have intermediary individuals who can connect you with one another. You have to create and find those individuals yourselves. So I think that was the number one piece. Secondly, I think is also public perception, to be quite honest. I think think in Canada, the place where we live in right now, it's gone through waves in terms of perception towards immigrants and newcomers, where there's a certain segment of the audience, which is in fact a growing segment, which really thinks that these people are here to just take our jobs, create to housing issues, and so on and so forth. And that in turn, I think, starts influencing employer perception, right? They always say people follow the government. And today, a lot of the government policies as well in Canada are not really supportive of lowering barriers of entry to employment for a lot of newcomers, where even especially people who want to get into engineering or become doctors, you still find them driving Ubers, which was the same case about 10 years ago. And why has it not changed, right? We constantly talk about it. We see media talk a lot about it. But why has the situation not changed? Well, it's not changed because even though you have more settlement organizations, etc., policies aren't really changing or shifting. So I think that's the other biggest challenge, right? Where I remember even hopping into conversations with a few people and they would just shut down the call in the first 5 minutes because, they would just feel there isn't any value talking to this person because they would think this person is just after a PR and they're just here maybe to get that job, to get that PR, right? Without really taking out time to truly understand what's this person's passion. They really love this opportunity. They're working hard to make it happen, right? So I think that was the second piece. And I think the last one was the Canadian experience part as well. Even though I came with work experience from back home, like volunteering and working with startups, none of that really applied here. And it felt like you kind of were starting from scratch, even despite having that experience, because I don't know how, but I guess the country you come from invalidates your experience completely, even though those skill sets are very transferable. That obviously has changed over the years, but I think those were a few of the challenges that I came across. But I think at the end of the day, what really helped me is that personal branding piece I go back to, where now when I was entering into rooms or conversations, or even when people look at my profile, I make sure at that point, at least when they looked at me, they never saw of, oh, this is an international student trying to figure out life, because I know it came with those limited perceptions. But instead for me was, okay, this is someone who's trying to change her life and she's putting the effort every single day by doing XYZ things. So she's someone who has the potential to be Y. So that was a perception I changed about myself. And today, obviously, I very proudly showcase the international student piece because I think that's something I want to help people be proud about and say how that's something you should not be embarrassed and ashamed of, right? So I hope that adds context.
Yes, it truly does. So as you've mentioned through all your different challenges, was there ever a single moment where you considered giving up or pivoting again? So, if that did happen, how did you stay grounded in your purpose? Like, think of that one moment where you feel like this is not worth it at all. I'm gonna give up right now.
I
Was there
think
any
multiple
moment?
times, right? I mean, think about it for anyone, like about for yourself, or for others on the call, or for anyone out there, right? We all have a certain level of resilience that we build based on certain experiences we have had in our life, and a lot of us usually have limited perceptions of how much we can do, or how much we can bear, or how much we can take, on. And I think when I came here, there were multiple moments where I felt, was this is it. I cannot push any further. This is it. And I remember, especially when COVID had happened, my family suffered a lot financially back home. As a result, there was more pressure on myself and my sister because we both were doing an education here. So now kind of had the responsibility to make sure I can support my sister financially as well to complete her education, while at the same time completing my own education, right? And obviously, I was studying in a university. So you can just imagine how expensive the student fees are as well. And paying that off through like working part-time jobs, as you can imagine, is not enough at all, right? So I think there was a lot of challenging times at that point where you start even asking yourself the question, why me for all of this, right? Like, why am I experiencing all of these things and pressures at such a relatively young age of 18, 19? But I think now that I think back to it, I kind of start realizing, or even in those moments, I remember whenever I felt like giving up, it just made me realize that, I have come so far away. My parents invested so much to, build a life for ourselves, or that they could not build for themselves, right? Or to give us something that they did not have. And getting something incredible takes effort. Getting something incredible requires you to make sacrifices. And I told myself, what, this is me making a sacrifice in the now so that I can afford myself a better future. And they'll always say, you either struggle now to relax later, or you can relax now and struggle later on in life. And I said, you know what, let's just use this as an opportunity to struggle and figure it out. And I think finding the right network of people around me also helped, who, help you find that hope that, this too shall pass. Because I think the beauty of challenging times is they don't last too long. So I think you sometimes just have to have patience, keep your head down, keep working, and things figure out themselves and go around themselves. So I think for me it was just that belief and that reminder of, I would always remember my parents' faces, and I remind myself of how much they have done for us. And we don't have any option to sit down and relax, right? It just, you have to keep pushing until you see the light at the end of the tunnel and you make it through. And we made it through. And again, there are other challenges that come up as soon as you make it through. So challenges are never going to stop. That's the biggest thing I realized. What you can do though is build resilience to those challenges so that they just feel like as if you're having a walk in the park, right? With small disturbances here and there. So
Wow, that is truly inspirational. Thank you. So, for the students listening today who are either thinking about starting their own business or changing their career paths or simply wanting to grow as leaders, what are some practical steps they can take on starting to build their mindset or explore a career change today?
absolutely. I think the first and the most important thing is don't be hesitant to take out time for yourself to explore and figure out what is it that you really want to do. I think a lot of us have been put into this pressure of figuring out life by a certain age, or figuring out something or the other by a certain age, or accomplishing certain preset standards, whether it's in terms of grades, whether it's in terms of other factors as well. And I think we make the mistake of giving into those pressures. I think it's very important you first take a step back and really start investing time, honestly, into figuring out who do you really want to be, who do you really want to be known for, and what is it that you really want to do. And if it's something that does not align with what other people are telling you to do, what your other teachers are telling you to do, what your peers are telling you to do, or even what your parents are telling you to do, so what? In fact, you know what, great, stick with that. But I think invest the time into figuring out what is it that you really want to do, which requires you to try a lot of things, talk to a lot of people, right? And that also means, second part that brings me to, is don't fear rejection or don't fear failures. No one has ever succeeded by just winning in life. You will not, no one has ever, no one will ever succeed by just winning in life. Failures are so important, rejections are so important. In fact, if anything, I think rejection is a prerequisite to success. If you don't fall down, you're not going to learn what goes wrong, and you're not going to be improvised on that, right? So for that, go out there, try multiple things. Even if you fail, so what, keep going, right? Whatever you are doing in high school, whatever failures you have there, guess what, no one remembers that 10 years down the line, once you're a millionaire, billionaire, whatever you want to be, impacting x number of people, no one's really going to care about, whether you failed in high school in your academics, or whether you came last in that race that happened, or whether you did not become the prom person, right? Or you did not get a date to the prom, or whatever that is. No one's going to think about that when you're successful. So just know that, focus on what is it you want to run after. Try as many things as you can that take you closer to that goal, or at least help you know what is it something that you don't want to do. That's even more perfect, right? So that you can start crossing those things out of your list. And now you only have 2 to 3 things to focus on and try out, compared to another student who never tries anything else. They graduate from high school, enter into university, and now suddenly they realize, oh my God, I don't know what to do with my life, right? But now you would be in a position where you would know what to do because you took that time earlier on, right? So that goes back to the third point that I mentioned before as well, which is, focus, put in the effort now so that you can relax later on, right? So make sure that. And I think the last thing I would say is start by taking action. That's very important. We all have millions of ideas, and they always say the most expensive piece of real estate today are graveyards. And that's because there are $1 million ideas all buried within, because everyone has incredible ideas, but there are very few people who actually take action to bring those ideas to reality. So don't be someone who at the age of 50 is looking back and regretting life on why did I not do that. So do everything you want to do to, even if you may get rejected, so that later on at least you can feel satisfied that I at least gave it my all. And I think that's very important. So I would say those 4 things.
Wow. To all the listeners, I hope you're paying attention because these are some incredible key takeaways. Finally, we reached the part where I will be asking you my favorite question. Now,
Okay.
If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your past self, just one, maybe
Hmm.
the version of you just starting your journey, what would you say?
Mm. When I was starting my journey, I would say everything that's happening to you at that particular moment is all going to lead you where you want to be. So just trust the process and keep working. That's it.
Wow, short, sweet, and simple.
Yeah.
And that concludes our session for today. Ritika, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey with such a passion and enthusiasm. So, did you enjoy our session today?
Yes, absolutely. And Shloka, I
Yes.
have to say, you are an amazing host. I
Oh, thank you.
love the
My
confidence
pleasure.
and everything with which you said the questions, and especially so early on. So I'm not surprised what your future is going to look like. I'm sure it's going to be incredible. And, thank you for having me. And I hope anyone who's watching this as well I think the biggest takeaway I hope anyone can take is no matter who you are, where you come from, no matter what your starting point is, whether you're getting certain grades or not, whether you are that successful person in life today or not, what really matters is, do you really know who you want to be? Are you clear on the path that allows you to go from point A to B? And are you someone who's willing to walk on that path to head to point B? If those are the three things you're willing to do and identify the right set of people as to join you as you go ahead on that process, I think you're someone who's going to be very, very successful in life, irrespective of where you come from, what all of those other factors are. So yeah, that just means all of us are champions. We just haven't recognized and realized that yet.
Yes, and your story will serve as a constant reminder that leadership isn't simply about titles. It's about the impact, resilience, and rising, even when fear strikes every time. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to our very first episode of The Leader's Voice, which wouldn't be possible without the Leader's Voice team and executive members. If Ritika's story resonated with you, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Until next time, I'm your host, Shloka Padola. And remember, your voice has power. Use it to lead with purpose. And thank you. This concludes our session for the podcast. Thank you so much, Ritika, once again. We truly enjoyed your presence here today.